There are about 9 dungeons. They shared 600 men. This dungeon took about 150 men. This dungeon is also called a transit room. When the ship arrived, the males who survived in their dungeons, they were forced to pass this side to the room of no return and to their ships. And the room at the back there, that's the branding room. That was where they identified the males. They placed hot metals on their chest, some at their backs, and even on their foreheads as a form of identification. So that's the branding room, and this is the transit room. We are supposed to go in there, but they are in there. So let's do the compound. Then after we come here later. Hey. Portuguese. At the back, you could see the Portuguese church. That's the first Catholic church in Ghana built by the Portuguese. But in 1637, when the Dutch took over, they thought the Portuguese might poison. They thought the Portuguese would use this as an auctioning hall where they buy and sell slaves. But the Portuguese used this to be a church. This is the first Catholic church in Ghana built by the Portuguese. But when the Dutch took over in 1637, because they were not Catholics, they were Protestants. So I'll show you where the Dutch built their church later. But they used this building as an auctioning hall where they buy and sell slaves. When the British took over, they used this same building as police training school. But now this building is a museum. And apart from the Portuguese church and these 2 rooms, all the rooms at the ground floor were the male slave dungeons, where about 600 males were shared among the rooms. Above the dungeons were the rooms for the merchants, missionaries, soldiers at the first floor here. Second floor was for the deputy governor, and the last floor was for the governor. So here, the higher your position, the higher you go. And you could see this slanted wall here. There is another one there. Some at the back of the castle. They are called buttresses. They were built by the Dutch to support the walls of the castle. The British added a metal bars on it as a form of police training. They climb up and down as a form of exercise. And also these 2 rooms here, they are not dungeons. These rooms are cells. The room with no symbol on top is the European cell. The one with the skull and the crossbone is the African cell. Now we are moving into these 2 cells and compare. Let's first start from the European cell. Yeah. Go inside.
So
no, there ain't none of that. Never. European soldiers who misbehaved in the castle. Some of the soldiers went out without permission. Others also got drunk, misconducted themselves. So these soldiers were kept here, but just for a few hours. Here they were giving food, they were giving water. And here they kept just few people here. You could see ventilation there. This door is the original door. You could see the structure of the door. It's well ventilated. So here 4 soldiers. Now let's move to the African cell and compare the 2 cells. All right, so please let's move into this one too. Okay. All right, so this is the African cell. And here they kept the male slaves who were fighting the soldiers for their freedom. They were kept here for them to die. But no African came here and went back alive. He had no food, no water. And when someone dies here, the soldiers would tie stones around the waist of the dead body, drop the dead body into the sea. Yes. And if you check the walls, you could see some scratches made on the walls. Yes. So please, you can come out now. Please, let's move this side. Most of them, they lost their life. So some of the ancestors lost their life. So they brought.
So no one can escape from here.
No, there was not a record about that someone escaped. We'll be moving as the ancestors went. There is a thick pillar here. For that reason, when you get here, you go down, count 4 steps before you raise your head. How it is. But now it's receding. So the ship stopped about 1 kilometer, but the conditions and to see dead bodies lying beside them. And also because at that time, the ship that came were sail ship. They don't use machines. They use the wind and manpower. So when they saw that the ship was not moving that fast, they have to offload some of these enslaved Africans in the sea. And when they were capturing these slaves, because they could capture a whole family, so some of the ladies, before they got to the dungeons, they were even pregnant already. But these ladies, when they got here, they didn't get any special treatment. They didn't free them. But for the ladies that the governor and the soldiers impregnated, they built stone houses in town for them. Those that they were not responsible for their pregnancy, they took them along. In the ship, some delivered with no one's assistance because all the females had shackles on their hands. They were all suffering. So who is helping? Just imagine giving birth to such a condition. How would a child even survive? But those who survived this hard journey made it to Europe, Caribbean, and American countries. Here was where they passed. And the rates at the back, they were brought by some of the Africans and those in the diaspora who believe their ancestors lost their lives here. Sometimes too, they pray here because they believe the soul of their ancestors are still present here. So this is what we call the room of no return. So we could use the next 1 minute to take some pictures here. Please be careful. All right, so please let's see this. This is a harvested rainwater. At that time when it rained, pipe holes were connected from the roof to that side. That side filters the water before it gets here. And if this reservoir is full, it could contain about 20,000 gallons of water. But now we are not using this reservoir anymore. And also because when the governor and the soldiers came here, they didn't come along with their wives. They thought that they might die here because of malaria and yellow fever. So the soldiers, they were assaulting the females in the dungeon sexually. But for the governor, he stood up there. That side was his balcony. He stood there, ordered the soldiers down here to open the gates of the dungeons for the females to gather here. Then he stood up there to make selection. And if a lady is being selected, because they don't take their bath in the dungeons, soldiers fetch water from this reservoir, bath the lady at the compound. Then the lady was taken to the governor's bedroom through a private access. Now let's see that private access where the soldiers escorted the lady. So this was the private access where the soldiers escorted the ladies to the governor's bedroom. And after the lady was raped, she was brought back to the dungeons. But if the ship arrived to take these females away, and they saw that the lady was pregnant, because the governor and the soldiers, they wanted their babies, they built stone houses in town for the pregnant women. But after delivering, when the child was 6 years old, the child was brought back to the castle for education. And some of these children grew up to become the first educated people in the country. Some of these children also intermarried with the locals, and this has an effect on the coastal line of Ghana. In the coastal line of Ghana, you still hear some of the foreign surnames like Johnson, Williams, Bartels, Vanderpoy, Bannerman, and others. This as a result of the children. They were called mulattoes. And the mothers of these children became domestic slaves. They were the one washing and cleaning the rooms of the soldiers. But if a lady is being taken to the governor's bedroom, then she refuses to be raped. The lady was beaten up there, then she was brought back to be punished. Now let's see how they punish females who resisted rape from the governor. Please, equivalent to 50 pounds. This was what they were using to punish females who resisted rape from the governor. There was a chain on this ball. About 8 of these balls with chains were placed on the legs of the lady. The lady was forced to stand here for 24 hours. No food, no water, whether rain or shine. Yes. And they also did this to serve as warning to the ladies in the dungeons, so that when the governor select them, they had no option than. All right, so this is one of the female slave dungeons. This dungeon took about 100 females, but the materials on the ground are not original. In 2015, they had a program here called the Return of the Slaves. And as part of their program, they selected some females to spend 24 hours here. These materials were used to cover themselves. But after After that 24 hours, some of the ladies got malaria, yellow fever, rashes, and others. Just 24 hours here. So then what about the females who spent about 2 to 3 months here? And also on top of this dungeon was a church. The Dutch had their church up there whilst they worship their god. They punished the females here. And the red bricks, that's the original floor where the ladies slept. Along the castle, you come across wooden bars like this. These are not the original bars. These are some of the original metals used at the time. But because it is rusting, that's why I changed it to wooden bars. So this is one of the female slave dungeons. Now let's see another dungeon for the females.
One.
All right, so this is another dungeon for the females. This dungeon also took about 100 females, but the floor is not original. They were sleeping on stones. There was a metal gate here. These two holes were their source of ventilation. But here we won't talk much. Let's wait. There are some group in there. Then we go in there to see the largest female dungeon. All right, this is the largest female dungeon. This dungeon took about 150 females. But at that time, because these ladies were not allowed to go out to ease themselves, so there were 2 containers at the corners of the dungeons, where the ladies urinated, defecated, and vomited. But because they spent about 2 to 3 months here, usually after some few weeks, the ladies became so weak that they couldn't get access to the containers. So they did everything right on their self and on the floor. They urinated, defecated, vomited, and even had their menstrual flow right on their self. And about 2 to 3 months, no bath, because they took their last bath at Asin Monsoon before coming. So here, no bath till they left. And this was the same floor they were sleeping and eating. But where we passed on this side were the gates of the dungeons where metal doors were. In the middle and the other one there were their source of ventilation. In this castle, there is a room called the magazine. That was where the soldiers kept their guns and gunpowders in there. Whenever the gunpowder is leaking, it produced some bad smell in that room. So they needed to channel a ventilation from that room to the back of the castle so that that scent in that room could pass there. But they didn't do that. They placed the ventilation here. So whenever the gunpowder is leaking, the scent passes through the side and it pollutes this dungeon. This made a lot of the females lose their lives here. And these were also brought by some of the tourists. But this one was brought by a Portuguese woman who she is pleading on behalf of what her ancestors did to Africans. So please, you could read this, then we see the governor's apartment. And some of them, they brought it. Some of the tourists. Watch out.
I've seen a picture of a open.
Yeah, but I don't know the specific one here. Please. All right, so this was the governor's bedroom. How spacious it is, good source of ventilation as well. So this was his bedroom. He also had a living room here. All right, so this side and the other side were the living room for the governor. He also had a washroom there, and this was his dressing room. So bedroom, 2 living rooms, washroom, and dressing room for one person. Now let's take this side to see the governor's kitchen and the Dutch church. the ladies. Hey. Yeah, kind of.
And this is
The governor's kitchen. Here we have two separate kitchens. This kitchen was for the Dutch governor, that side was for the Portuguese governor. When the Dutch took over, they didn't use the Portuguese governor's kitchen. Then we take this side to see the Dutch church. And this church is right on top of the female slave dungeon. So as they pray here, they worship their God. The females too are the ground floor suffering. And this writing is a Bible quotation, and it is written in Old Dutch, which says, Zion is the Lord's resting place. Psalm 132. They believed the Lord was here and they were punishing the ladies at the ground floor. The pictures on the wall, these are some of the properties of the slave masters who owned land, and they built the properties in Spain, Catalonia to be precise.
what God has said about this one
Then we take this side to see a fort and some cannons.